Ladies in the Know, I'm Tanya Sue Maestas. I am the guest podcaster here with Dinks at Chicago Midwinter. I am so excited to have Kirk Dewart with us today from U.S. Bank. And we're going to talk about money and all things dentistry and how to get started with practices and practice financials. So Kirk, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I live here in the Chicago area. I have been in the dental banking space for almost 20 years, most of my banking career. I cover and have a team of 15 healthcare and dental bankers in the central U.S. So from sort of the Dakotas down to Texas, and including Chicago. So right here in the home market. And just really enjoy being in the space. I enjoy working with specialists who come and educate, help practice owners with questions they have. So that's a big part of what I enjoy.
That's awesome. And how did you get into this space?
Going back almost 20 years ago, I started out as a sort of a generalist banker, just assisting small and mid-sized companies. And as I got into the space, heard more about what was happening with healthcare, the specialization of assisting practices coming down market a little bit and getting into solo practice owners or practice owners that might own 2 or 3 locations or small group practices. And that seemed to connect well with what I enjoyed. It also connected well with the small business and business banking focus I had. So that was, again, about 20 years ago. But
wow.
Yeah.
I would love to know, since you've been in the field for 20 years, the changes that you have seen when it comes to dentistry on the financial side of things.
Yeah. Well, I think, getting educated ourselves as service providers to dentists and dental practices, I think we've come to realize that what practices need is much more than just a loan, although that's a big part of how they get into owning a practice. And we certainly provide that, but it's also a much more holistic need. So how to run an efficient practice, assisting new practice owners, making sure they have the right advisors that are, working with them, surrounded by them. So, and I think also, the associate level dentists have become much more resourceful in educating themselves. So when they come in, financially, they have goals they want to hit. They know exactly where they want to take the practice over a period of years, but they still have questions. They know they're much more educated about what questions they want to ask and how sooner in the process they tend to ask those questions. So as a banker specializing in dental, it's important that we have answers for that. It's important that we know other advisors that we can introduce them to. That's the biggest thing I've seen.
It's so important, like you mentioned, to ask the right questions to whatever bank you're going into as a dentist. Financial literacy isn't really there for new dentists, dental students. In your opinion, what's the best way to learn more about maybe going into a practice or a startup?
That's a great question. So I think, first of all, if you know other dentists that own a practice, hygienists that are involved in a smaller practice, I think just reaching out and having conversations, exploring a little bit. And that can be, frankly, through the universities, and through dentists that have graduated. They may have programs where they can make introductions for them. So I think that's the first thing. I know there's lots of publications, articles, podcasts like this. Yeah. And so I think that's another big change and a big advantage that I think younger associates have now. I would also say, and hopefully a lot of the colleges and universities right now are bringing in professionals from the outside to come in and have conversations, maybe buy a lunch, but have conversations with D4 students or D3 or D2, frankly, that are starting to ask those questions, who are wanting to get educated. Certainly there's a lot of great options going to work for a larger practice, going to work for corporate dentistry, but also understanding, how do I get into owning a practice for myself? What's the advantages of doing that? What does that look like? How should I prepare for that? Mm-hmm. And so I think making those connections as they can while they're in college, But then as they get out, reaching out to their own network, so other dentists they might have. Certainly as a banker, I love to have conversations like that. So they should always feel free to do something like that. Or some of the advisors I work with, I know are also interested in having those conversations.
I think it is getting better. I think that more schools are bringing in more people, more banks to talk to students, but it's not at the levels where I would like it to be. I think that there's a lot of confusion and a lot of questions that students have when they're graduating, as far as anything that it goes from managing your finances to a 401ks to starting a practice. There are so many questions that we have coming out, and it can be really challenging to know where to even start. Yeah. In your opinion, in addition to maybe reaching out to mentors and to bankers, do you think that there is some value in just going to different practices and kind of asking for more information? Should they go straight to the banker? What are your thoughts?
I think, I think going into the practices is a good first step.
Yeah.
Right. And again, if you can find a mentor, that's always a great source of knowledge, somebody who's interested to help the next generation come through. And it also potentially provides an opportunity to maybe get a position to buy a practice down the road. I think that's, to do
Right.
that is fantastic. But I think also bankers like myself have understood that we need to also prepare the next generation of associates and dental students graduating. And that helps us because that obviously means future
Right.
clients for us. It really does come down to educating. And I mean, we sort of have to be a little bit selfless about just going out and providing that to the dental community, to the healthcare community. There's, a lot dental students come out with a lot of fear. And I understand that. I've seen it in their faces. Certainly student debt tends to be a big fear, but when you talk to somebody who knows how to work with dentists, those are things that we expect to see. A dental student, when they're looking to buy a practice or to look to pay down that debt, we just look to make sure that practice is going to provide the cash flow that they really need to continue just to make those payments. We expect them to have a couple $100,000 at least in dental student debt, just a part of what happens. So I think working with a banker reassures them a little bit if they have that opportunity to sit down. And I think, frankly, attending an event like Midwinter, having an opportunity to stop by a booth, have a 5-10 minute conversation. I know a lot of times there's also speakers at these events that will talk a little bit to the dental students and to associate levels who do have questions like that. And I think that can also reassure a little bit about what to expect.
100%. In your opinion, if a dentist is interested in buying a particular practice, what are some questions that the dentist should be asking to that practice owner before going into, ownership of that practice?
Yeah. I think, first of all, understanding a little bit about the patient base. I think making sure that the philosophies of that practice is a good fit for that dentist coming in, whether they want that selling dentist to stay on for a transitionary period or not. I think being able to connect with patients in that practice is important. I think to the extent you can have conversations with the staff, I think that also is helpful. Understanding a little bit about how it's worked, what the plan is to keep staff on, I think is an important one. And I think just, making sure there's a fit. To me, those are a couple most important things as you're coming in. Yeah.
A little controversial of a question, but in your opinion, startup or buy a practice?
Great question. I think it all depends on what you want, what market you're in, the supply of what's available, which can have an impact, obviously, on the price that you pay for a practice. I think there's room for both. And I think if you're going to do a startup, oftentimes you want to prepare yourself for the ramp up period. You want to prepare yourself for all that's involved in starting up a business. When you come in and you buy an existing practice, you sometimes have an opportunity to spend some time in that practice, experience what it might be to be a business owner and a practice owner before you actually take that practice over. So there's some pros and cons to both, but I actually support both as well. We do at US Bank support both. So, yeah.
What are some other features that set US Bank apart from different other
Yeah.
banks?
Great question. We really try to come at it from a holistic standpoint. So again, we bring a very robust practice finance program for both the practice needs as well as real estate. So we know a lot of dentists like to own the practice location they're in or maybe expand a little bit. We fully support that. But we also have spent a lot of time investing in what we call the healthcare revenue cycle. So things like collecting payment, things like managing the cash they have and doing so efficiently, accelerating the cash coming into the practice, all the things that financially bring efficiency to a practice. And so we do that through a network of about 100 local healthcare bankers throughout the country. And so that's a big part of our message is we deliver that locally. We take a much more holistic approach. We put a lot of energy towards servicing after the loan closes. So we feel like with, marrying up that idea of holistic banking, local banking with the products and the expertise we have in healthcare, that's going to make a difference and provide a different level of value for our clients.
When it comes to purchasing a practice, the banker's involvement at the financials of an existing practice, can you talk a little bit about what that looks like?
Sure. Well, typically a bank is going to have items that it needs to see. So when you have an existing practice that a associate might be buying, a banker's going to want to spend a little bit of time to see a couple years of that selling practice financial situation, the financial statements, understand the revenue trends, understands the expenses, how profitable it's been, and frankly, how much that selling practice owner has, how much extra they pulled out of the practice, what we can add back into the cash flow, if you will. So typically a banker gets pretty involved in understanding some of that, asking some basic questions that hopefully get the buyer to think a little bit as well. In an ideal situation, we're also working closely with their advisors. And if they don't have advisors, that's one of the steps we'll help take is connecting them to a great CPA, connecting them to potentially a broker to help them find a practice, to a great attorney, great insurance. Those are all important advisors that we feel are important, necessary to have. So those are just a couple of things that we try and do to get involved, from the financial aspect of a practice.
Numbers are not my thing. And, for people who have listened to me speak before, I'm very vocal about that. I always say I can count to 32 and that's about all I need. But what are some, it's so nice to know that the bank is with you every step of the way. What are some red flags that a dentist should look at when they're going and vetting out different practices to see if they have interest in purchasing it?
Well, I think it's very common for a selling dentist to start to back away from their practice. So instead of maybe being in 3 or 4 days a week, they might start doing 2 or 3 days a week. But I think if you have a practice owner who's really dialed it back, or maybe isn't really present at the practice, you might see that through a drop in revenue that's more than just the number of days a week, but actually loss of patients. So I think it's sort of an absentee seller that's been doing an absentee, has been absent from the practice for a year. Those are the types of things I think you should be looking for as a potential red flag. And sometimes it's hard to connect with the staff, but I think, office staff can make a big difference in the practice you're buying. So if you can get a sense of how that practice is connecting with the selling dentist, is there an issue there or a concern? I think those are probably the big things, the main things that I would suggest are red flags to look for.
Okay. As a new dentist, I always see it from the buying end, but I'm curious for the more seasoned dentists, does U.S. Bank help facilitate sales of practices?
Absolutely. I think the biggest ways we do. So certainly our own network of people that we work with who might be brokers, who might be dental supply reps, who might be CPA firms, and having those close networks that work together. And oftentimes, if you have the right network, if they get word of a practice that's selling or trying to connect a buyer and a seller, they can help do some of that if you find the right network group. I think we also love to try to connect our clients who might be selling to a buyer as much as we can in a certain market. I think there's an opportunity to do that sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
So I think those are probably a couple of the biggest ways that we try to make those connections.
Yeah, I really like hearing that. I think that, especially in this day and age, a lot of the older offices are tending to go towards corporate, being bought out by corporate. And in many markets that works. But it is really nice to see that mom and pop shop dental office kind of continue and staying small and staying local to their patients. And so that's really great to see U.S. Bank there to support their members with some of those practice transitions. In your opinion, what is the biggest financial advice that you would like to bestow to dentists in general? Yeah, choose wisely. Choose wisely.
Choose wisely. I think whatever decisions that a new dentist decides to take in terms of their career path, meaning if they decide to go work for corporate, if they decide to go out on their own, to do a startup, to go work for a smaller practice and hopefully someday take it over. One of the biggest mistakes I see is that they know a friend who's a dentist who went out and bought the brand new, car or built a big house. I'm a big believer in holding off a little bit, putting some cash back. Number one, you never know. It's good to have a nest egg. Yeah. And I think when you do have some debt and you're just simply trying to accumulate a little bit of cash and continue paying that debt down, those are important steps. Whatever you decide to do in your life in terms of borrowing money, and just good financial hygiene, frankly. So that would be my biggest advice.
I think that's excellent advice. Kirk, I've really enjoyed our conversation today. If you had to leave any additional thoughts or anything else that you'd like to share about U.S. Bank, what would that be?
I would just say we are very relationship driven. And I know that's a term that a lot of banks throw around. I think we are working very hard to put that into action. And I think given an opportunity, we will demonstrate it very quickly. I think we are a good long-term partner. And I would say for anybody who's looking to do something in the dental space, reach out to us. Let us have a conversation.
So, very good. Well, Kirk, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Bye now.